Story 1. Hyperindependence and the ability to detach easily from highly charged emotional situations or people. Story 2. Thinking that being low maintenance meant never asking for help, never having needs, and thriving on emotional starvation. Personality quirks, right? Story 3. Disassociation. I am 34 and didn't know this was even a thing until about a year ago. I don't remember a lot from my youth, and the things I can remember, I couldn't tell you what year or age I was. It's weird. Story 4. Never asking for help and feeling bad about receiving any kind of help can lead to being overly willing to assist others. Avoiding making any noise is not just about being considerate. Story 5. Being an overachiever, I thought I was just a go-getter, but deep inside I believed I would only be loved as long as I was successful. I also realized that my perfectionism is toxic and the enemy of healthy productivity. Now I practice self-compassion, take naps without guilt, and enjoy myself, which has led me to achieve almost as much as before. Because things are more enjoyable and easier as a result. I realized it's not that serious. Story 6. I have come to realize that approximately 85% of my personality is a trauma response, and that is just how I am. Story 7. I thought I needed to talk about my problems right away. Otherwise, I would become anxious. It turns out that was a panic response to being forced to communicate before I was ready when I was younger. I am still learning to sit with my feelings and process them, but that realization was a significant breakthrough for me. Story 8. Perfectionism. I would correct my own mistakes before anyone else had a chance to. I realized it was because I was terrified of being yelled at. Story 9. I am a people pleaser and absolutely hate hurting people's feelings to the point that I will have a mental breakdown. This has led to many people sharing their problems with me because I am easy to talk to. I take pride in being highly empathetic, not an empath. It turns out that guilt-based discipline was a significant tool for my mother and most of my caregivers. Story 10. Social anxiety. I never understood what was wrong with me for always stressing and feeling fearful around people I didn't know at parties or gatherings, even around those I knew. It was a shock when I stumbled upon a forum about social anxiety. It all made sense, and I finally recognized what I had. Story 11. Being a naturally gifted mediator. I have become incredibly skilled at managing a mother's unstable emotions. This experience has made me an expert at quickly de-escalating situations. Story 12. I'm funny. I believe it came from trying to diffuse the anger and tension around me as a small child. Story 13. Extreme fear of missing out. I am hyper-aware of anyone hanging out without me. I realize this stems from years of emotional neglect, which makes children believe they are the problem. As a result, I have become a hypervigilant adult. Story 14. People-pleasing and still not feeling enough after being manipulated in a toxic relationship. I also hesitate to ask for help, thinking I am a burden and that no one would support me, believing it is all my fault in the end. Story 15. Never being able to eat comfortably in front of people. Our diets were strictly monitored at home concerning what we ate and how fast we ate it. We never ate enough and we never ate at a normal speed. In the high-stress anxiety of my household, I found it hard to keep the food down and would often end up throwing up. People always praised me for my slim figure and good table manners, but I later learned that it was because I was too anxious to keep food down. As a child, bad table manners resulted in severe punishment, even for something as minor as making too much noise with my fork on the plate. I thought it was normal to feel nervous eating in front of others, but it turns out the level we were dealing with was not normal. Story 16. Shutting down emotionally and mentally during a conflict is a common reaction. In similar situations, I tend to react strongly and defend myself because I have experienced high blood pressure my entire life, which keeps my fight-or-flight response activated. I can detach from situations and forgive quickly because I lack an emotional connection to many things that appear unimportant or repetitive. I used to flinch when people raised their hands while speaking. Having experienced abuse as a child, I often expected people to hit me if I talked too much or made a mistake. It took me years to overcome this response, and I no longer react this way. Story 17. I thought I was very empathetic and observant. It turns out I was just afraid of people because of my childhood and learned about human emotions to protect myself from others. Story 18. Over-explaining everything because I thought people would misunderstand me or get upset turned out to be just hypervigilance from growing up around unpredictable anger. Story 19. Constantly saying sorry even when I have no need to the point where people ask me why I am apologizing. I also find myself isolating. I thought I was just an independent individual, but it turns out I have many wounds from my childhood. My childhood wasn't as healthy as I previously thought, and I have some serious issues as a result. There is a lot I have been uncovering lately since getting off my medication. When I was on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, it was easy for me to push things aside, but now I have to face all these painful thoughts. Life is very overwhelming right now, but I hope I will be okay someday. Story 20. I thought I was flexible. The truth is, I hated myself so much that I allowed others to shape me with their judgments. Story 21. Being judgmental, being aggressive under the guise of assertiveness, and the need to control things are all traits I inherited from my mother. I'm not saying she was entirely negative, but there are definitely habits and personality traits that I picked up from her that I now work to correct. Story 22. Sneaking for no reason, like hiding my food wrappers under the trash. I immediately hide and feel shame if I'm angry or need to cry. Story 23. Not smiling in photographs. It turns out my mother had chipped part of my tooth when she punched me because I refused to pray with her. I was around 8 years old. I blocked that memory for decades and simply thought I wasn't into smiling, which annoyed me when others urged me to do it. Then I had my tooth fixed, and the memory all came back to me. Now I smile a lot. It's the best way to overcome that horrible moment. Story 24. 2 things. I am brilliant in a crisis. Calm, focused, logical, and unemotional. Nothing phases me. In project management and planning, I can think through every scenario and every possible risk to ensure all angles are covered. Story 25. Acting like a clown to please others, fearing that they will leave me as my parent did, and dealing with the subsequent neglect. Story 26. I had a challenging childhood where my emotional needs were not fully met, which led to feelings of resentment towards others who required care or emotional support. Additionally, being a woman in a society that expects you to adore children, have them, and structure your life around them has been quite difficult for me. While I still don't enjoy being around children and have no desire to have any of my own, I have developed more patience, grace, and respect for both children and parents. I recognize that my dislike of children is more of a personal issue I need to address rather than a problem that society should accommodate. Story 27. I am literally a walking fawn response. Everyone loves me. It's hilarious. There is nothing wrong here. I am just vibing, oversharing, and feeling terrified of your feelings and my feelings. Oh my goodness, a boundary. Story 28. I thought I was naturally snarky and sarcastic, but it turns out that when I'm not surrounded by a family that belittles me all the time, I'm actually very complimentary and kind. Story 29. I recently realized I automatically assume any minor negative feelings are due to being too emotional. My mom would shut down whenever confronted with anything she didn't like. As a child, you can't accept that a parent cannot show you how to deal with your emotions. You cannot accept that your parent is in the wrong and immature, so the problem must be yourself, and you're just too sensitive. Story 30. My calmness is something I almost never compromise. I realize now that having witnessed numerous fights and arguments since childhood, my response has been to avoid becoming like that. Story 31. Having to prove why I am right and correct everything so the other person knows what is correct can be challenging. For example, my husband often mixes up actors. He might say, "Hey, that's the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean," when it is clearly not Johnny Depp. I have to resist the urge to Google it and prove him wrong or embarrass him. I have learned that it is okay to let those little things go. Not everyone has to be right all the time, and neither do I. I inherited this tendency from my mom. If I make a mistake, it often turns into a lecture and research session about why I was wrong and what is correct. I am 28 years old, but I am trying to do better. Story 32. The ability to remain calm and focused in a crisis or stressful situation is important. Whenever chaos arises, I tend to react quickly and calmly, while others, like my wife, may freeze up. I am unsure if this is related to past trauma or if I simply have undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Story 33. Panicking when I made even a minor mistake and trying to hide or fix it on my own. It turns out it's okay to make mistakes. I was terrified of being criticized, mocked, or yelled at. I still am sometimes. It's a work in progress. Story 34. Being emotionally unavailable. Turns out I was neglected throughout my childhood and teenage years and never talked about emotions, so I never learned how to communicate emotionally or process my own feelings. Story 35. I quietly disappeared and removed myself from people's lives because I didn't think it mattered if I existed or not, or I didn't want to be a burden. I felt like I never had my life together like everyone else seemed to. Recently, I realized that I thought I was serving my purpose in life by taking everyone's abuse, believing that was my worth. At 45 years old, I still have a lot of work to do, but it is worth it. Story 36. I decided not to let things bother me. Although things did affect me, I often kept it to myself because I didn't believe I deserved to have my needs met. Story 37. The moment that affected me the most was when my therapist discussed my sense of humor. Apparently, dark, self-deprecating jokes are a defense mechanism. I believed I was simply being funny. Story 38. My dark humor and my ability to discuss really difficult experiences, as if I'm talking about a bowl of oatmeal, reflect my severe freeze response. Story 39. People-pleasing. Suppressing my own needs, wants, and desires. People would tell me I was too nice. I was in my early 30s when I realized that I didn't need everyone to like me, and my life became a lot easier. Story 40. Hyperindependence, detachment, and the oscillation between people-pleasing and being aggressive or argumentative. Story 41. The inability to feel my body has always made me feel like a ghost looking at the world through a window, as if I am floating all the time. I still often feel that way. Story 42. Being the first to offer help when someone is in need, regardless of how inconvenient it is for me. I grew up thinking that I was only worthy of love and appreciation if I was giving something to someone or doing something for them. I am still working on maintaining my boundaries and learning to say no, but I am making progress. Story 43. Going silent during an argument with a loved one makes me want to be alone. After some time, I feel better, but I worry that they might hate me now. Story 44. Being a people pleaser. I never rocked the boat, never said no, and felt walked on by everyone. I believed that if I devoted myself to caring for others, they would love me in return. I valued myself as a people pleaser to the point of pursuing a career in psychology to become a counselor. However, as I have gained confidence and learned to set boundaries, I am now uncertain about my desire to become a counselor. I still want to help others, but likely in a different way. Story 45. I never believed that anyone actually liked me. They were either just being polite or pretending because they wanted something. I am unlearning this, but it is a challenge. Story 46. Being introverted can be challenging. I am not excessively introverted. Rather, I struggle with trust issues and social anxiety due to past experiences of being hurt, excluded, and neglected. Story 47. Being able to detect slight changes in mood and behavior instantly and predict what people will do immediately after is a unique skill. Additionally, I can influence or change that behavior by altering my own actions intentionally. I always thought I was just perceptive, perhaps even gifted. It turns out this sensitivity is common in individuals who grew up in abusive environments. Story 48. I'm particular about portion sizes. Everyone must have an equal serving of a meal if I prepare it. I won't let anyone get seconds until everyone has had their initial serving. I thought it was just a quirky side effect of having some mild obsessive-compulsive tendencies until my coworker and I discussed food insecurity as we work at a nonprofit focused on community outreach. I realized that I relate to this issue on many levels. My fixation on portion sizes stems from my own experience with food insecurity during childhood, which lasted until I was almost through puberty. I don't have mild obsessive-compulsive disorder. I simply excel at compartmentalizing so I can handle my anxieties later. Story 49. I thought I didn't like physical touch, such as cuddling, being held, and falling asleep while touching, but it turns out that it depended on who I was with and how they treated me. Now, I crave those things. Story 50. I have no reaction when people hurt me. I thought I was unaffected, but I realize I am just very good at dissociating. Story 51. It turns out you don't have to make yourself useful for people to like you. Having boundaries or not taking on too much won't make people hate you. I genuinely thought people only liked you when you did things for them. It was unthinkable that people could just like me for who I am. Yes, that was a trauma response. Story 52. Indecision is the inability to trust yourself to make any choices, even regarding small matters like what to have for lunch. When you rely on others to decide for you, it allows you to attribute blame to them rather than taking responsibility for a potentially wrong decision. Story 53. Apologizing for everything. It turns out it wasn't just me being polite. It stemmed from walking on eggshells throughout my childhood. Story 54. I don't just have my associate's degree anymore. It is a full-blown PhD at this point. Story 55. Being able to compartmentalize anything. I worked the day of my mom's wake. The minute I walked into work, it was work mode. After 3 years of therapy, I don't know if I could still do it to that extreme, but I still manage. Story 56. Being terrified to the point of crying when someone leaves the house to go to work or something. Oh, hey, past me, it's called abandonment issues. Story 57. I become very quiet when people are angry, so they do not turn on me. I dislike being yelled at. For a while, I thought I was simply a good listener. Story 58. Making myself physically smaller. I am a tall girl at 5 feet 11 inches, and just this year I realized that when I am feeling vulnerable, I hunch more. I haven't had great self-esteem, so my posture has always been poor, but I realized how much worse it gets when I am afraid of confrontation. I am now working hard to be aware of when my posture is suffering and when my mental health is struggling. Story 59. I used to be a perfectionist and held myself to a high standard. This meant I would apologize repeatedly and become very upset with myself for making mistakes. It often felt like I had to navigate through challenges just to avoid criticism from others. Now, when I make a mistake, I acknowledge it, but I don't underestimate my worth. Story 60. I find myself constantly apologizing for everything I do. When someone crosses my boundaries, I still feel the need to apologize. If someone around me is upset or having a bad day, my mind tells me that I must be the reason, and I should apologize. I recognize this pattern, but it's difficult to change. Story 61. Limerence and maladaptive daydreaming. I am finally taking steps to identify and address these issues at the age of 38. Wish me luck. Story 62. I do not possess a human lie detector. I always believe the best about everyone and assume they are telling the truth until proven otherwise. Feels like a strange optimism. I cannot imagine that anyone would take advantage of me, lie to me, steal from me, or hurt me. As a result, I often find myself in situations where I am taken advantage of. Story 63. I am not allowing myself to get attached to anyone or anything. I have experienced friends abandoning me repeatedly, and classmates consistently taking my belongings. Story 64. Being a night owl and experiencing panic attacks on Sunday nights. I initially thought it was because I dreaded returning to work or school on Mondays. When I was 14, I endured a massive earthquake on a Sunday night while stuck in my room, unable to open my bedroom door. I recently asked my mom about the day of the earthquake, and she confirmed it was a Sunday. Story 65. Not being able to trust anyone to truly like and care about me makes it hard to believe that someone could love me. Sometimes, I even doubt my best friend when they express their feelings for me and how much I mean to them. I always feel bad for doubting them because I know they care for me and want to be in my life, but I struggle to understand why they would like me as much as they do. Story 66. Not caring has always come so naturally. It took a long time to realize how unhealthy it was, although it was slightly beneficial. Story 67. I recently discovered that hyperindependence is a concept. I am realizing now that the ability to detach emotionally and mentally from certain toxic situations is not merely an ability I possess. Story 68. Hyperindependence and losing myself in relationships made me think I was just being caring. I became overly anxious about communication, which revealed my abandonment issues. I have a very good therapist now, and I will be okay again soon. However, I won't date for a while after my last breakup, which was the most difficult one I have experienced. Story 69. Being a people pleaser, I didn't realize I was doing this until I went to therapy. I still struggle with it and with setting boundaries in general, out of fear of making people upset or disappointed. Story 70. I do not want to be responsible for other people, especially when their mental illnesses flare up. I try to support them as much as I can, but at a certain point, when someone is having a really bad episode, I can't. I feel that it is necessary for them to take care of it. Story 71. Working hard around the clock and feeling miserable, I thought it was my personality to work hard. It turns out this is the result of my parents always telling me that it is not enough. I have to work at least as hard as them and overachieve. Story 72. My strong personality, characterized by interrupting people and raising my voice, has been a focus of improvement for years. While I have made significant progress, it is not completely resolved. Story 73. Extroversion and being a giver. I realized it was just a strategy to survive my mother. Story 74. Hyperindependence and people-pleasing are a combination of behaviors likely to lead to significant burnout. Story 75. Walking very softly everywhere I go and accidentally sneaking up on people, as if I wasn't even trying to startle them. Story 76. Something brought to my attention today. Saying yes or okay to everything, even if I disagree, to avoid or deflect confrontation or making others unhappy. Story 77. I freeze or I rage until I can flee. I experienced this yesterday with my sibling. I used to slam doors so hard they broke. When we discussed our argument today, I reminded them of my slamming doors, stomping upstairs, and generally being unregulated. Oh, I just thought you were spoiled. Now, I was an undiagnosed and invisible child who needed a safe person and did not find one. Story 78. Suppressing emotion. Not breathing correctly. Bracing for impact with shoulders pressing upward. Strong startle reflex. Story 79. I feel embarrassed to ask for help with many things and I apologize too much, even for things that do not require an apology. Story 80. Shutting down and going quiet during an argument can be a learned behavior. As a child, I discovered that the only way to get my stepmother to stop talking was simply to not engage. As an adult, I tried to dismiss this as merely going along to get along. However, this approach can backfire when you're at work trying to acquire resources for a project you are responsible for, or in a relationship when you need to resolve issues in a healthy manner. Story 81. Hyperdependence on random people can lead to flinching away, even when someone is not actually trying to cause harm. Story 82. Shyness and being introverted can be complex. While I'm not an extreme extrovert, I actually enjoy talking to people, connecting, and joking around. I am dynamic and outgoing when I feel safe and happy. Story 83. Being too mature for my age as a child and teenager, I was really just holding it together as a way to suppress what I was experiencing. Once I found a secure and comfortable environment, I began to unravel. Now, I am working on learning how to regulate my emotions and interact with others in a healthy manner. Story 84. As a child, my sister often made fun of my preferences and what I liked in general. I concealed my personality around her for a long time. Even now, I sometimes feel ashamed of my interests if they are not mainstream. I hesitate to play my playlists on Spotify or watch specific shows when someone is around. My significant other has been helping me with this, and I love him very much. Story 85. I thought I was called to adopt. I began adopting dolls as early as 4 years old, dreaming of adopting unwanted children from all over the world. It turns out I just felt like an orphan and wanted to save others from experiencing that feeling. Story 86. When talking to someone, I end the sentence or question with a little giggle. I am 64 years old. A therapist told me this behavior probably developed when I was very young, as a way to keep things light in my family and prevent my dad from launching into a tirade over something like dinner being 5 minutes late. Story 87. Not remembering most of my childhood, I always expected disappointment to avoid feeling let down. I created worlds in my head to escape the sadness, bad experiences, or trauma that was occurring. It became my safe place. Story 88. I stopped years ago but was focused on being right. I wasted years and growth opportunities in my 20s trying to be correct instead of growing. Story 89. From my childhood, where trauma is all I have known and been exposed to, I do not know any other forms of communication. Story 90. I am highly independent and not emotionally open. I believed I was good at regulating my emotions on my own, but it is a trauma response to religious emotional abuse. Story 91. Sleeping with the door locked and sometimes with an object blocking the knob. The call was definitely coming from inside the house while growing up. Story 92. Sorry everyone, but I can't help apologizing for everything I do. I could rescue a family from a house fire and still feel bad for bruising grandma's foot while carrying her out. Story 93. Hyperindependence manifests as a refusal to ask for assistance due to the fear of personal rejection for making the request. Story 94. 1. I stared blankly when someone started shouting at me. I acted as the emotional barometer, trying to smooth everything over for everyone. Story 95. I was bullied early in my childhood, which turned me into a funny person. I believe I became funny because humor is often seen as non-threatening, allowing people to view me as harmless but ultimately disrespect me. Later in life, I realized that my humor was just a survival response. I thought it was part of my personality. I hope this helps others, as I have been working on myself and can confidently say that I am happy not having to please anyone. Story 96. I used my biting wit like a poison dart. I was gone before you knew you were gone. I still find humor enjoyable, but I only use my abilities for good now. I learned about functional boundaries and established a few. There is no need to defend myself in that way anymore. Story 97. Being a passive listener is a negative trait because it tends to attract unpleasant individuals. Story 98. You know that sharp, tightening feeling in your sternum when experiencing severe anxiety? Apparently, it isn't normal to feel that once or twice a day, several times a week. It's also not normal to treat this feeling as regular day-to-day stress. I have been having dozens of these anxiety episodes every year for as long as I can remember. I genuinely assumed that was how people were supposed to feel. Story 99. Being funny all the time is becoming a necessity for me in social situations. I feel the need to be witty and charming. I'm unsure if this is a way to mask my social anxiety, but I find myself putting on a high-energy persona around people, even my friends. This often leads me to babble and stumble over my words, sweat from nervousness, and struggle to relax without oversharing. Story 100. I thought I was maybe the shy, quiet type, but as I've gotten older, I've realized I have a few red flags for avoidant personality traits, probably due to years of childhood trauma. Story 101. I apologize for everything and have become skilled at understanding what others want from me, allowing me to adjust my actions to please them. I did not realize this was related to a trauma response until this year. Story 102. Trusting nobody, except for a few people who have proven themselves to me, and questioning everyone's motives. Story 103. I used to think I was manipulative because when someone got mad at me, I would say whatever I thought would make them less angry. Story 104. When things get especially tense, I will not remember it later. I have to rely on what people tell me happened. Story 105. I cannot sleep in front of anyone. It does not matter if they are watching. If someone else is sleeping in the same room as me, whether a partner or friends in a hostel, I cannot relax. I struggle to sleep even when my husband was home, and I find it impossible when I have house guests, even my closest friends. I cannot be that vulnerable in front of another person. It does not feel safe. Story 106. I find expressing love awkward. I tend to bottle up my feelings until I can't anymore. I struggle to stand up for myself emotionally. With my mom, my feelings never seemed to matter or made her angry. Story 107. I became hypersensitive following post-traumatic stress disorder 2 years ago, but it remains undiagnosed because I can't bring myself to see a therapist. I have become extremely emotional with my partner, and it has been a nightmare, honestly. Story 108. Hello, everyone. I'm here to remind you that you are all wonderful just the way you are. You can be who you want to be. It's okay. And everything will be all right. The world needs all kinds of people. Just strive to be happy and kind. That's all you need to do. Story 109. I feel most comfortable both in my mind and body, in chaos more than during regular times. I am always anxious and overreacting unless it's a real emergency. In that case, you want me on your team. I am calm, focused, and decisive. Story 110. I am not asking for help because I assume it is pointless to do so, a lesson I learned in my childhood. I did not want to bother my friends. However, I am learning to allow others to help me, as I realize that I enjoy helping my friends, and they may feel the same way. Story 111. Being very into TV shows and films, I had a calendar that tracked all the upcoming movies I was interested in. I also created a separate weekly calendar for TV shows. Once I moved out, I lost myself a little bit. Although I still love watching films or TV shows, it's no longer the center of my life. Story 112. I may be late to the conversation, but I can be whoever you need me to be to sell you something. I was very good at my job and never needed to lie. I just needed to identify what was important to you, highlight that, and act in a way that endeared you to me. Turns out I might be on the autism spectrum, so much of that was masking. I also experienced abuse growing up and have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I realized I excelled at my job because of my fawn response. After a significant loss about 1.5 years ago that resurfaced many childhood issues, I no longer had the energy to fawn. Felt like I wasted my entire career. I transitioned to customer service and can still be charming when necessary, but now I resent that I can endure criticism so well. Story 113. Following the rules set out in my lease and being overly strict about enforcing them with all guests and roommates has created an intense paranoia about being evicted at any time for breaking a rule in even the slightest way. This anxiety stems from being kicked out of my house 7 times between the ages of 15 and 17. I was often evicted for the most nonsensical reasons. The most absurd incidents were: 1. Attempting suicide when I was barely 15. Requesting to be put back on my medication after being forced off. I was taken off for being addicted, as apparently wanting to receive medication at the right time is considered addiction. I was 16. Getting a job without my parents' knowledge so I could leave home on my own terms. I was 17. It seems when your parents cast you out for trying to be responsible and for asking for help while following the rules, that experience carries over into adult life. Story 114. I struggle with feeling anxious when people are behind me and feel overwhelmed with fear when others chase me, even if they are friends. I also tend to flinch away from contact with people I don't know well. This last issue often affects me at work since many people are casual with touch, and I have to control the urge to move away or tense up to avoid offending them. Story 115. I feel incredibly needy, as if nobody likes me and that they will eventually leave. I think this stems from my childhood when I wasn't shown much love, and my dad abandoned me. It's frustrating because I believe this interferes with my relationship with an amazing partner, but I don't know how to fix it. Story 116. I thought I was just a naturally forgetful and dreamy girl, and maybe to some extent I am, but it turns out that I have a type C personality. My anxious and avoidant tendencies, combined with my traumatic childhood, lead to my mild but frequent dissociation. Story 117. Face blindness makes it difficult to remember names and dates. I could run into someone I worked with and was friends with 5 years ago, and I would not recognize them today. In fact, I probably wouldn't remember them from a month ago. I have been married for 10 years, but please don't ask me the date. Story 118. I am a pretty empathetic and emotional person. However, when pushed too far, the person responsible feels no different to me than a bag of cat litter on a store shelf. They become not human, not even a person, just a meaningless object. I thought everyone felt this way. It had nothing to do with the war zone at home. Story 119, almost never crying, maybe once every couple of years, and if so, in brief sessions of about 10 seconds. Then I move on immediately. Story 120, walking on my tiptoes, trying to move as silently as possible, being able to identify someone just by their footsteps, struggling to express a boundary, and then immediately retracting it the moment anyone creates any kind of fuss. Story 121, if someone is angry or moody, I always assume I did something wrong and need to fix it. Story 122, I often have the feeling of being out of breath. According to two separate mediums, one from a different city and 6 years apart, it turns out my grandfather used to choke me, though I do not know why, and I may not be ready to explore that. Story 123, I cry the moment anyone offers any type of criticism. My boyfriend gives me good, constructive feedback and gently tells me things that can help me improve in small ways, which I appreciate because he knows how I react. However, no one ever provided me with constructive criticism while I was growing up. So I immediately start tearing up when someone sounds like they are about to point out what I'm doing wrong or suggest changes I should make about myself. It feels frustrating because he is only trying to help, yet I tear up because I think, what did I do wrong now? Or, how am I not meeting this person's expectations this time? In reality, he is simply trying to guide me toward behaviors that are less destructive. Story 124. Being easy means never voicing your true opinion or quickly changing it to fit in with those around you. It involves putting yourself last to meet others' needs to avoid arguments, as everything always goes their way. When your opinion is dismissed or when others overpower you, it becomes difficult to express your needs or opinions. They might put you down, talk over you, or become upset when situations do not align with their expectations. Story 125. Code Black situational awareness used anger to motivate me on projects and assignments. I drank a lot during heavier exams. Story 126. My tendency to flee at the first sign of trouble is consistent across various aspects of my life, including friendships, romantic relationships, and jobs. The moment I sense trouble, I leave. I grew up in a dangerous time and place, New York City in the 1970s. As a small child, I faced constant assault. Although I am now a physically imposing adult, I have never been able to overcome my hyperactive fight or flight response. Story 127. My dad is in his 70s. He was just diagnosed with autism and is working through the trauma. I feel bad, but I am glad he is getting help. Story 128. I have a high tolerance for insults or negative remarks, and it takes a significant amount to make me angry. It requires a lot for me to even recognize a problem. Story 129. There are significant concerns about privacy and the fear of punishment for withholding information. A major trigger for anxiety is the feeling of not being believed. Being earnest and fully open can sometimes lead others to assume dishonesty, creating a frustrating situation. I prefer to keep to myself and only engage socially when necessary. Interacting with others can be exhausting due to the constant presence of hidden messages and ambiguous intentions. Story 130. Turns out compromise isn't synonymous with appeasement. I used to be proud of how relaxed I was. I used to quietly look down on people who never conceded as needlessly aggressive and selfish. I thought I was better for sacrificing my comfort and joy to maintain peace. Story 131. Scarcity trauma affects many aspects of life. The amount of food I let expire because I am saving it is concerning. Why do I need clothing items I haven't worn in 9 years? Parting with them almost causes me physical pain. My difficulty in sharing is directly related to this issue. It has been quite a journey. Story 132. Constantly planning everything was due to anxiety, worry, and fear stemming from traumatic experiences. Story 133. Giving someone the silent treatment for a few days and completely withdrawing from them whenever I suspect they are leaving me out of things. Story 134. Being able to get along with anyone is important. I strive to make the other person feel as comfortable as possible, ensuring a peaceful interaction for both of us. This approach works well when you are so detached that you lose sight of your own needs and wants. Story 135. When I was younger, my mom and dad split custody. My dad would give me pills to make me sleep for the duration of our visits while he drank. I eventually developed the ability to sleep without pills. When I mentioned this to my doctor, she was horrified. Story 136. Start detaching from people who like me back because who would like me? A loser, obviously. If someone finds me good company, I would immediately start judging them for being an absolute loser for liking me. I would only ever want to be around people who thought I wasn't enough, as they clearly are better judges. Story 137. I always knew that being unable to ask for help was a trauma response, so I don't think it counts, but that's mine. Story 138. Always being the person prepared to help out with any problem in an attempt to be useful and make friends. Story 139. I struggle not to drop everything and offer to help others, even to the point of ignoring my own needs, both personally and professionally. I was raised to believe that my worth comes from caring for others, and then I received confirmation that this belief was accurate. It's interesting how, when you start to take care of yourself just a little bit before caring for others, including setting boundaries, there is often a significant loss of friends and family. Story 140. Whenever someone is yelling, whether at me or someone else, I completely shut down like turning off a computer. I feel no emotion and disassociate to the point of forgetting what is happening around me. Story 141. Be angry all the time and jump at the slightest provocation. I thought he was just an irritable or bad-tempered person. Story 142. Being sarcastic at times can be a way of protecting myself from perceived or imaginary ridicule and shame, I suppose. Story 143. I curse myself whenever I hear my own footsteps and panic when I hear familiar footsteps approaching. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.